This is Pastor Bill from Park Place Church in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Luke chapter 8, verse 16 records Jesus' words where he says, "No one lights a lamp and hides it in a jar or puts it under a bed. Instead, he puts it on a stand so that those who come in can see the light." You know, this verse has been running through my head a lot lately, especially as I've watched the evening news. We've seen stories about beautiful acts of kindness that people have shown to one another during this difficult time. Some of the accounts are large and costly, like the restaurants that are sending food to hospitals to feed those working on the front lines. Some tell stories of parades of cars driving by someone's home to celebrate a birthday party or a bridal shower or the birth of a baby. Some are fun to watch and entertaining as someone dressed up like the Easter Bunny drops eggs throughout the neighborhood. But one of the examples, I just saw it yesterday, was about a young girl who has been playing tic-tac-toe with the mail carrier. She leaves a piece of paper with a tic-tac-toe board drawn on it. She leaves it in the mailbox, and each day the carrier makes his mark, and then he puts it back in the mailbox to await her move the next day. You know, I enjoy watching and hearing about these little acts of kindness and togetherness that people are showing to one another. And each day, as Darlene and I eat lunch while listening to our governor's press conference, I'm impressed with the governor's focus on moving forward slowly so as not to cause us to fall backward. And so many times I've heard her encourage people to do something kind for someone else. In fact, just today, she really focused on that. I'm so appreciative of the governor encouraging acts of kindness and the media for reporting them on the news. These are the lights which Jesus was speaking of, and we mustn't keep them a secret. We mustn't hide them or keep them only to ourselves, but instead we need to put them on the table for all to see. And to us today, this table is the news reported on our televisions and online sources of information. I find it interesting that a simple kindness, regardless of how small it is remembered for longer than we might think. Remember, it was late in the spring of 1970. I had moved to New York City in September of 1969 to go to school. I must admit, living in Manhattan was quite an adjustment for me, having grown up in a small town like Somerset. My roommate and I shared an apartment on the Upper East Side, 86th Street and York. We were 1 block from the East River, 1 block from Gracie Park and Gracie Mansion, which was the home of the mayor. The school year was almost over, and soon I would be returning to Somerset. And I remember this particular night. It was a beautiful evening, and I decided to take a stroll down to Gracie Park. There was just the slightest breeze coming off of the river, and a light fog was starting to creep over the water and up into the park, causing moisture to settle on the walkways and the well-protected patches of landscaped lawns that were spread throughout the park. I sat on a bench overlooking the water for a while, just thinking about the amazing year I had experienced in school and in Manhattan, and feeling my clothes beginning to absorb the moisture of the fog, I decided it was time to head back to the apartment. I'd walked only about 50 feet when I spotted one of those protected patches of lawn. Some landscaper had surrounded a pile of dirt with carefully selected field stones, building a small oblong retaining wall which raised the lawn about 1 foot above the walkway. And on top of the stones was a black wrought iron fence, which was probably about 18 inches in height. And the grass Inside this fenced-in area was thick and rich. It was lush and green, the kind of lawn that just begged for someone's bare feet to step inside this garden paradise and allow the cool softness of the grass to bathe tired feet and toes. I stood for only a minute before taking off my shoes and my socks. You see, for the last 9 months, my feet had walked only on concrete and blacktop. And I remember times back home when I was younger and how I loved walking in the wet grass in my bare feet. As I stepped over the pointed fence, I noticed the threatening sign, "Keep off the grass." A brief moment of indecision. I looked around. I was alone. No one was anywhere in sight. It was already dark, and only a few lampposts gave off light in this city park by the river. What do I do? Do I put my shoes and socks back on, go home? Or do I continue with my plan? I thought for a few minutes, and then I thought, 5 minutes. I'll just stand there for 5 minutes. And so I stepped over the fence, and my tired, hot feet sunk deep into the cool, wet grass. Words cannot adequately describe the joy and the pleasure my feet were experiencing as I stood there with my eyes closed. You know, it was probably only about 2 minutes when a man's voice said, "I guess you didn't see the sign." I opened my eyes to see a New York City police officer. He wasn't much older than I was, and he was just standing there looking at me. Unfortunately, I had seen the sign, but I had decided to ignore it. I explained to him my reasons for standing in the middle of this patch of grass, in spite of knowing I shouldn't have done it. And the smile on his face, it said it all. He knew exactly what I meant. He said, "I wish I could take my shoes and socks off and join you, but that wouldn't look too good." But I agree, being on your feet all day on these hot sidewalks can really tire out the old dogs. And finally he said, 10 minutes. I'll give you 10 minutes. He stood there outside the fence watching as he asked where I was from and how long I'd been in the city. And I told him my story as he shared his with me. After the 10 minutes had passed, he looked at me and he says, "I'm sorry to say this, but your time's up." I stepped over the fence and back down onto the walkway. We shook hands, wished each other well, and said goodnight, each going off in our own direction. It was a simple kindness, but one I have never forgotten. It was 10 minutes of quietness and peace shared between two men standing in a small city park. Gracie Park was nestled at one edge of this busy metropolis, and for a few moments it provided a place of shelter from the fast pace of a city where the non-stop noise and activity sometimes feels like an attacking horde. You know, I've often wondered where that officer is now. Hopefully he's retired, and maybe, just maybe, he's walking barefoot through some moist, deep grass somewhere, enjoying the peace and quietness of retirement. Sir, whoever you are and wherever you are, I thank you. And may the Lord bless you and those you love. So I ask all of you, what act of kindness can you offer to someone today? Pray with me. Lord, kindness can be expensive and extravagant, or quiet and simple. It can be a kind word or a simple act of service. And regardless of what the act is, we know that kindness grows as it is shared with others. May our kindness and service, which begins simply, be multiplied many times over through the power and blessings of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks for joining me today. I hope my story, my memory, brought back some remembrances of your own. You know, this week seemed to fly by. But please join Pastor Wayne and me this Sunday. Our worship service will be posted on Facebook and YouTube by 10 a.m. Sunday morning. I'll be back here again on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday next week, and Pastor Wayne will be back on Tuesday and Thursday sharing words and music. Until I see you again, may the Lord richly bless you and keep you safe and well, and I'll see you next week.